1, 2, 3.
Hello and welcome to the programme. My name is Joe Austin and this is Scéalta. Can I remind you that Scéalta is a joint production between Fáilte Fierce to Hear and Féileann Phobal. And my guest tonight is my friend. And I'm going to ask her to pronounce her surname for no other reason than there are 20 different variations. I'm going to try and pronounce it and then I'm going to be corrected by her. So to head her off at the pass, I want to do both. So it's Karen Sethuraman.
It's Karen Sethuraman, but that was pretty good, Joe. That's pretty good. I've been called all sorts of things, but it's Sethuraman.
And you're a whole pile of stuff, and we'll talk a wee bit about all of the things that you're involved in. We don't have time to cover in detail all of them, but for those who have just joined us or those who know a wee bit about you, you're a mother, you are a wife, you are obviously a Baptist minister. That's why you're dressed the way you're dressed. Yes. You're a community activist.
Yes.
You are involved in a wide variety of activity that would be very much community driven.
Yes.
And for a while, a few years back, you were the Belfast chaplain. Yes. And I have worked with a number of chaplains and they're all very good people. I haven't worked with one who was queuing up to do work. You were in the mayor's office every morning going, what do you want me to do? What am I to do today? And that's very commendable. And I suppose it gives an insight into your own personality. You're a mother of 3 children. And
yes, that's right.
What happened to them? But we'll talk about them in a wee way. Can I ask you, I think about that you're one of the, if not the first, but one of the first Baptist pastors in Ireland. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm actually the only female Baptist minister on the island of Ireland. Currently, as things stand today, I grew up in the Baptist tradition. We can talk about that if you want.
Yes, it is.
I grew up knowing that the Baptists and that particular tradition and church do not ordain women, do not encourage women to go into leadership roles in terms of being a minister or a pastor. But I am currently ordained by Baptist Union Great Britain, and with their blessing and their umbrella, I'm able to be based here in Ireland and in Belfast.
I watched it again a few nights ago, the very impressive TED interview that you give around women in society and women's parts and roles and how women do shape things and how if they were unrestricted they could make things a lot better. And it was very impressive, I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for anybody that doesn't know the TED lecture, it is in itself internationally acclaimed, and it has broke ground in every kind of element of social society. So tell me, if you don't mind, take me from a wee girl to how you've arrived at where you are.
To this?
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I grew up in East Belfast. I grew up in Hindford Street, which is probably best known for Van Morrison.
Yeah.
And I have memories of people knocking the door and asking, where is Van Morrison's house? So that's where I grew up. I was raised by a single mom. And one of the things that she did, she was a woman of faith, and she took me every week to church and Sunday school. I think it's important to say, Joe, that I didn't wake up one day and decide to be a Baptist. I didn't even know in my youthful years what that meant, in a sense. The only reason why I went to the local Baptist church, which was was around the corner from where I was living, was simply because my friends went there from the age of 12. And I look back in those years and I'm thankful for them because I think they kept me out of a lot of trouble. But I didn't choose that church. It was simply because they had a very vibrant youth group. And I just got all these kind of hobos like myself off the street and let us play pool and snooker and darts and all those things. And it happened to be a Baptist church. But when I do remember, 2 things I remember really well is I remember going to the church on a Sunday and finding it boring. But this youth group was what kept me connected. The second thing that I really remember is that they specifically did teach, even to me as a young person, going up through my teens, that women could not be part of church leadership. And I remember hearing that. But going to church and Sunday school from a very young age, I was always fascinated by the Bible stories, fascinated by the life of Jesus, fascinated by Moses and the Red Sea and Daniel and all those stories that we hear. I was that little kid that genuinely was wide-eyed and fascinated. And so somewhere in those teenage years, this fascination did become a place where I really did begin to believe in God. But hand in hand with that was this teaching of there are different rules for men and women. And that's okay if you feel called to be a surgeon or a hairdresser or whatever. But it was almost like they were saying you could do all those things, but you can't be at the leadership table within church. The difficulty with that was that what was happening to me in my teenage years was the church calls it a sense of call, and I would stand by that. It is a deep sense of call. I would not choose this. Trust me, I would not choose this. But it was a real deep sense of call. It was that real something is happening. I've been called to do this. And so all of a sudden we had our theology and reality not matching up. What do you do with a Karen? What do you do with a girl who has been told she has to be silent and that some Bible verses are used to justify that? But what do you do with this deep sense of call? And that's where I found myself then as I was coming out of my teens. And if I'm honest, Joe, I didn't articulate it. I don't think I knew how to articulate it. I just knew that something deep was happening in me. Do you want me to go on with the story a bit, or?
I do, but I want to just take you back a wee step so that people can follow. No, I do. It's actually fascinating. Not least of all because, and maybe it's an age thing, maybe it's people of my age, when we talk about priests or rabbis or pastors or ministers, people think of this very deep, thinking, serious person. And I have to say, stereotypically, men. And they think of someone who is at home reading the Bible or reading catechism or doing all of that. I know you quite a while now. You're full of fun. You're extremely mischievous.
Is that a compliment?
And you have a laughter that's infectious.
Thank you.
Were you a serious teenager? Was there a contradiction between, for instance, what we're told is the promiscuous of teenagers and I think it's just growing up rather than and when you if you could and you talk to your friends and you told them you were going into the ministry, did they kind of look at you as if you're a bit off?
Yeah, and I think it's important to say I never had those conversations in my teens. I never, because I think and a lot of people think this as well. They genuinely do accept the teachings of the church and people that you look to in leadership. And so if you have leaders saying that women cannot be in church leadership, because of my faith and my standing with God, something in me was like, okay, that's okay, But the other side of that, Joe, was you talk about, I was that kid that asked questions. I was like, I don't understand this. Really? Based on a couple of verses, you're saying that women have to be silent, but you say I can be. So I really annoyed the life out of my youth leader, and he said that on my wedding day, that I just frustrated him because there was something inquisitive in me. There was something in me not willing to settle, not even just for that, but a lot of things in faith that didn't add up with reality to me. I was a normal teenager with normal struggles and normal mess. I still do have my struggles and mess. But I understand that people have this perception of ministers. I have them as well. I simply see my role to love my neighbor, to love God, and to love people. And I just see my role as people who entrust their story to me. And if somewhere I can help them on their spiritual journey, great. But for me, being a minister is never about, well, I'm better. I'm more educated. You're in, I'm out. I'm more holier. I think the heartbeat of being a minister is saying, I'm human just like you, and I don't have all the answers, but let's do this journey together. And so, yes, there was a serious side because I am studious. I am a theologian. I think extremely deep and I study. And so as we stepped into our 20s, other people started to come to me. By this stage, we got married and naturally went into another Baptist church because, again, it was in our neighborhood. But people started to say to me, is there any chance that you've been called to be a minister? I didn't know where to go with that. Like, where do you go with that? But I thought it was weird that they were saying something that I knew deep in me. And then I had what I call a burning bush moment, but that's another story. Unless you want me to share it.
Well, I do want you to share it, but just a bag of it.
Yeah. So what?
It means that was a defining moment when you knew
a real divine encounter with God. Yeah.
Did you share it? Did you share it?
So basically, all these conversations were going on. The amazing thing about this new Baptist church that I had become part of, I was serving in ministry. I was heavily involved. They gave me opportunities to be part of a team. I ended up eventually, after I studied my degree and my master's, becoming part of that leadership team. But I could never be pastor because Baptists don't allow that. But I was fortunate in that there were people there who were for women in ministry. Maybe not necessarily willing to break the mold and make the change, but were able to come alongside me and say, Karen, I do think you are called to do this. And I think you're called to kind of challenge this and all of that. And I'll never forget, I think I was, I was only a few years ago, Joe. I was only like 22 or something,
Yes.
But I remember going to this women's conference in the King's Hall. So there was about 3,000 women there, and we were all doing our thing. And this speaker came from America to speak to this room full of women, and she was a pastor. And I remember thinking, here we go, right? And she was brilliant. She was brilliant the whole weekend. She taught and she did all the things that she did. And at the very end of the conference, within the last hour, she said, listen, before I get on a plane and go home, I believe in this hall, in this place, there is one woman who is called to be a minister and a pastor, and she is running from this calling. And that was my burning bush moment, because I could feel the sweat breaking out, and I remember looking at the exit sign thinking, get out of here. But it was that God moment where God said, this does not look right. This does not make sense, but I have called you and you must do this. And that was then how the journey began. I became comfortable in the confidence. Do I choose what people are saying, no, you can't? Or do I honor that God encounter, which was really deep and strong? And here I am. So
I want to bring you back just to two things I want to ask you. You mentioned your mother. And was your mother, I know mothers are mothers, but was your mother a great influence on your life? Was she supportive of your vocation? Was she concerned about it?
Yeah, my mom was a mom of faith. She really is an unsung hero. Certainly not least for having to bring me up. I did have to have those conversations saying, Mom, I think I'm called into this. It's interesting because before she passed away, which was very recently, and we had some really good conversations. She watched the TEDx talk and she just cried as she watched it. And she just said, I am so proud of you, Karen, because we have waited for your voice in the church and in community. And Joe, I'll be honest with you, that's the greatest compliment that,
of course it is,
that I've ever had. And so she was always supportive. She would have joked and said, how on earth do you do this? You're constantly hit left, right, and center. It's like you're in a room where no one's going to listen. All those things that women encounter in a very male-dominated place. And she would say, I don't know why you do it. You know, you should go and be a lawyer. You've always wanted to go and be a lawyer or go be a politician or go and do something. But there comes a time where that call ceases you and you can't get away from it. But yeah, she had a huge influence, and those end words for me, I think, have encouraged me to keep going.
The other person, of course, among many who have touched your life and influenced you is Carrie, your husband. So is it Tamal, am I right?
Yes, Carew is from, he's originally from South India, but he's born in Malaysia. But he's a good Irishman now, you know, he loves his Ulster fries. But yes, after the burning bush, if you can imagine a guy growing up in a culture where women, you know, it is a different culture. And I encountered that when I met, that's a whole other podcast, Joe, when I met his family, his beautiful family, and being a strong female, that had its challenges. But one thing about Carew, when I came home from that conference, I was in tears. And I think he thought something had happened. We had 2 babies at the time. They were, you know, very, very, just very young. And I just said to him, I need you to sit down because I don't know how to tell you this, but I think I have been called into church ministry. And he just looked at me and said, okay, baby, let's do this. So he was great. And I have to be honest and say, I could not do what I do without his support. He would tell you, and he said that even when he met me, he sensed there was something very much in this sense of call. So,
if you don't mind me asking, you know, a wee girl from East Belfast, and where did you in Ireland or in England when you were studying, or?
No, Carew originally came here to study, so he was a wee young thing, and listen, in youth groups you all hang out with people. Carew was part of a group of friends that we hung out from all parts of Belfast, but I was never interested in him, if I'm honest, and I don't know, just the friendship just grew in, and here we are. We've been married now, it'll be 23 years next week, so I don't know how he stuck me.
But just for the record, when I spoke to him about your relationship, he said that you chased him around the youth club, and that he just described, he was frightened of you. Just give
no, that's yeah, you know, he does. He deserves a medal. Carew is everything I'm probably not. He's very quiet, laid back, and he provides an amazing balance to our relationship. Marriage is tough and hard. I don't know how we've made it. I'm not, you know, it's difficult. It's hard. But we're still here, and I am really thankful to him, because it can be difficult for a guy. He came from a Hindu background, converted to Christianity, but for him to be a guy in a male-dominated faith place with a woman who is his wife, going to step into ministry, you know, sometimes, you know, because it's always the pastor's wife, but he's the pastor's husband. So you know, he's had his own challenges too.
So let me take you again, fast forward. You've studied very hard, which again, you mentioned in passing, you have an ability to focus very intensely on the things that you're doing, be it scripture, be it studying, be it academic studying. So you study, you are, if you like, officially, you've got the driving test, you passed that, you're now a minister. So,
yes.
do you look around and go, where am I needed, or how do you end up where you arrive at?
So, whenever I was going through kind of my ministry training, I was in the leadership church of a very large Baptist church. Those days for me were good days. You can only learn so much in theology. You can only learn so much in, it's real life that shapes you. It's your own real life, but it's the life of other people. And Joe, I guess I realized the more that I studied that I felt I didn't fit for all sorts of reasons. There were a few things happening, but the sense of my inquisitive questioning, which I still have, and all that going on, and being in a church that was never going to ordain me, but it wasn't the main reason why I stepped out. I stepped out because my role originally within that Baptist church was to be in the community. And you may say that's a perfect role, and it was, of course. I just stepped into something that was my heart. But I encountered day in and day out, whether I was working in the addiction ward or whether I was working in housing estates, I encountered people saying to me, I do not fit in church. And that began to really impact me over a number of years. It was for all sorts of reasons, but it was that I don't fit in church. You know, I look at my stuff, look at the things that I struggle with. I would never fit in there. And so I started to have conversations with folks wondering what it would be like to do life outside church, And is there such a thing? Is there a role for a minister that can really work in community without the end game being trying to get you into church, but rather helping you connect with God? In 2012, there was a Life and Times survey done. And this is important because it was around this time things were bubbling. And it said that 80% of people in Northern Ireland said they're spiritual.
Yeah.
But less than 30% say they go to church. Normally, I think as church leaders, we hone in on that 30%. We think, right, you know what, we need to come up with new strategies. Let's all get together, get the flip chart out. How do we get that 30% up? How do we get people into church? But I honed in on the fact that 80% are spiritual. And I thought, well, my end game isn't to get people into church. How do I get them to help them connect in their spiritual journey? So I stepped out, and that's a book in itself, Joe. You can imagine the hits in that.
Well, let me touch on some of those things.
Yeah, it was difficult. I'm telling a male leadership team that I'm stepping out to do this. They blessed me through gritted teeth, but I knew they were looking at me thinking she has lost her head and she will not survive. And actually, I was probably thinking that myself as well. But I genuinely had this vision to set up places and spaces for people who felt they didn't fit in church. And over the course of the last 10 to 12 years, through very difficult days, I can see what was a vision taking place and realizing this is what I've been called to do. And so the lovely thing about the Baptist Union is they know Karen. They know that they call it a pioneer ministry, and they're very happy to stand over that. So for this season of my life, I don't feel called to be in the church ministering, though, Joe, I would never knock an offer. If somebody came to me, of course, and has in the past, I would consider that. But for this season, I feel I am where I'm meant to be.
This is just an observation, and I would know a fair amount of people in the various ministries, be they Presbyterian, Protestant, Catholic, or some of those of the Jewish faith. You find that most young ordained people have nearly a father figure that they can go to and they can discuss how you resolve problems, how you approach problems. Have you ever encountered that? Because you're the first off this new breed and, a trailblazer in many ways, was it a lonely experience? Did you find someone within the ministry as opposed to the family that you could go along and... Because you can't always be confident. Nobody is always confident.
No, I'm not, Joe. You need to know I do this job terrified. I think that's really important. Just because somebody smiles a lot and can communicate well. Yeah. Trust me, my knees are knocking most of the stuff that I do. I think it's important to say that one of the things I learned pretty early on is that mentorship is important. It's important to have good people around you, whether that's a larger group and then kind of your close friends, but you need those mentors. I always remember somebody saying, Karen, it's like you've arrived somewhere too early. And I never understood that, but there are other places across the world where people are looking and rethinking church and have been long before I've ever come along. I think it's important to say, Joe, that what I do is never about denigrating church. Whatever tradition. Churches are doing amazing things, and there are some phenomenal ministers and priests that do amazing things. It's just a matter of I've been called to do something different, to go on a different path, and somewhere in that we need to learn to cheer each other on and to you cheer me on, I cheer you on. But has it been lonely? Yes, it has. Certainly in the early days. I didn't think I was going to survive. If I'm honest, a lot of the hits I got was from the very place that I thought would cheer me on. And what I mean by that is that, you would expect church communities to say, look, let's get behind her. What nearly knocked me off my feet the most was the opposition I was getting from church. But what kept me sane in that was the amazing connections and how I fell in love with people in the community. So it was this weird setup, the very place that I grew up in. And listen, it's not about knocking those people, because a lot of them have apologized today, because I think, you know, they say, okay, she's just not talking the talk. She's really trying to be faithful to a calling. And I think it's right for church and for ministers to be suspicious. And people say she's a maverick. No, I'm not. I'm just someone who's called to do something very different, and whose heart is genuinely in the community.
And I have to say, particularly in Ireland, there is a long and a very honourable history, particularly within the Protestant faith, of people stepping outside the lines and people trying to move, you know, trying to move society in a more gentle way, a more broad way, a more appealing way. And for them, that is what religion is about. I want to ask you another question.
Sure.
In the middle of all of this, and dashing here and rushing there and all of that, you have 3 children, 2
Yes.
girls and a boy.
Yeah.
There's not many children in Belfast that are able to say, my mommy is a minister. So in the north, my mommy is a minister. So, and teenagers have their own experiences, and I know from my own experience in my own family, it isn't always a smooth path. So does being a minister, does it add any additional pressures, or is it something that you just kind of, you roll with the punches?
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of things in that, Joe. I think the first thing that I would say is that my greatest influence is to be a mom. You know, if I pass out of this earth and I have 3 children who in some way I have helped them navigate through this life, then I think I've done my greatest role and job. It's not easy for them. I remember one of the things that I got hit with when we came out of church, out of a large church to try some pioneering stuff. A lot of people said, you know, this is unfair to your kids. You're taking them out of this, and, you know, you're taking them out there, you know, but I think, if I'm honest with you, the more that my theology and reality didn't match up, I didn't want my kids to grow up in that kind of rule regulation type of teaching that I myself was being challenged in. I wanted them to live free. I wanted them to find faith for themselves if they find it, and also to love them should they not.
Yeah.
So whereas I, you know, and particularly in Northern Ireland Christianity, it's like, you got to be saved. Are you going to heaven? Are you going to hell? And we know the lingo, and I really think we need to undo a lot of that as ministers, if we could just have the conversation, because I was damaged by that as a person of faith. It weighed me down, but somewhere in this journey I found freedom. So all I've wanted for my kids is that same freedom if they choose faith. So I was brought up to believe certain things about women, to believe certain things about LGBT plus community, to believe certain things about race. And here I was, a woman married to someone from a different race, a woman called to be a minister, and a woman who works with the LGBT plus community. And so for me, I hope my kids find faith freely, and find God in the midst of how we as church and ministers have so often given him a bad name, you know.
And let me put this to you, and this would, I think, be most people's experience. You're the first of, and hopefully you're the first of many. You are on a new role. You have moved away from the comfort of a bigger church body,
Yeah.
and you're moving into an area which is very much uncharted territory.
Yeah.
Most people would keep their head down. That's just the way I think people would deal with it. Most people would, you know, get established, get their credentials out there, and would do all of that. But not you. So you dive into the middle of one of the most controversial, it shouldn't be controversial, but controversial concepts that divide all churches, and that's the LGBT plus community.
Yes.
So you become the unofficial chaplain almost to that community. Was that understood, or was it a battle? Was it for you? Because I understand what you're saying. You're saying that this is the most natural thing. You know, this is the most natural thing in the world for a minister or for a Christian or for a faith-based person to be doing. But was it difficult? Did you get a difficult time for that?
Yes, I have, and I still do. There's a few things I would say around this. Is I get the theology that people use to say what they say from a church position in terms of the LGBT plus community. Because remember, I lived it and I believed it for a while.
Yeah.
You talk about, getting right out there, Joe. You need to understand there was years I wasn't. I just kept my head down and got on with what I was doing. And in those years, because I was working in community, I was meeting people after people after people, and many of them were from the LGBT plus community, people who've become my friends. And so it was a case of, okay, so what do I do here? Here's the theology that I've been taught, and here are real stories. It wasn't matching up. The theologian in me did, for a few years, that theological work. And I did that because I think it's important if I'm in an arena to be able to get into that debate in a healthy way. I think what crushed me the most was one young person saying to me, the clubber passages have destroyed me as a young person of faith. Forget even talking about LGBT plus. For someone to say clubber, I think, what are we doing to people? What are we doing? We have the history of using the Bible and the biblical text to justify slavery, to justify women not being in leadership, and to hurt our LGBT plus community. And do you know what, Joe? And this I can, the clubber passages, I just don't think it's enough. If we use the Bible as a weapon to hurt and oppress and exclude, then I think we've got the gospel wrong. I really do. I just forget, even before we get into the biblical text and meanings in Hebrew and Greek, I just think there's something just very wrong with that. I just don't believe it's who God is. And I've said this often, and people think, oh, she's just a bit fluffy, but I think I'd rather get to God and him said, you know what, Karen, you didn't always get your theology right. You kind of, you had some warped thinking, but you loved people. And that's what I think is important. And so for me to say to someone, just because they're gay, well, I'm in and you're not. I'm accepted and you're not. You're condemned, I'm not. It's been a journey, but what changed me the most wasn't my starting place, wasn't the theology, though it happened. It was people's stories. It was people entrusting their stories, and it broke me. And because the majority of those stories have been gay folks who have been crushed and wrecked by church, and I think that's a scandal and heartbreaking.
Me and you have had many discussions, mostly very early in the morning. When you were
drinking coffee?
And I'm making you coffee, that's right. and I'm an atheist, as you know. But what always struck me about you was that the cornerstone for religion for you was love. In many ways for others, and not of one particular faith, right across the board. It was hellfire and damnation. I was going to say Dalmatians and damnation. Are they at opposite ends of faith, or is it simply one more comfortable to hide behind and the other more difficult to promote?
Yeah, I think it's important to say that people who take whatever theological position, whether it's on gender or sexuality, genuinely are good people. They are people who are acting out of what they believe, and their belief is because they love God. These aren't always people, So I think that's important to say. But there are many of us who have questioned that. I think what's important is, for me, I grew up in that. Actually, to be honest, I think when I look back, I think I turned to faith out of more of a fear of going to hell. And I remember that, but out of that, there's been a journey of unlearning a lot of things and challenging a lot of that thinking and theology. It still exists very much so here in Northern Ireland, and in Ireland, more so than the UK. I would say the UK is probably about 20 years ahead of us. But for me and for many of us, people call it progressive, they call it all sorts of things. It's being able to say, really? Is that what that means? Is that the sort of, because the thing is, Joe, it's okay for you and I to have different positions theologically or in anything. But the root of Christianity is that we should love each other even when we disagree.
Yeah.
That's true unity. To be able to cheer the church on that doesn't agree where I stand with women and vice versa. I think where it's going wrong at the moment is we are not example in that as people of faith, and so we're just cutting all around us and ripping off and whoa and all this here. And somewhere in that, and I am not perfect, and it's not about saying I'm right, they're wrong. It's somewhere I tread carefully, and it's somewhere where I go simply because I just can't, I could never have lived by a set of rules. And you've got to be this to be, because I mess up every day. But what I discovered was you are loved, Karen, as are everyone else.
Yeah.
Irrespective of your sexuality or your gender or your race, you're loved by God. And there came a freedom with that. Everything else just falls into place. And I just don't think it's our place to say who's in and who's out and who has a place at the table.
You're not one to hide your concerns below a bush or below a rock or whatever the proper expression is. Do you find that people now use you as their barometer? Do people come to you and say, look, this is my feeling about a subject?
Yeah.
What do you think? And if so, does that add to the pressure of not only being a minister, but nearly being a prophet as well?
Yeah, and that term prophet, I'm impressed, Joe. Yeah, that term prophet has been used before. Listen, I want to do this as humbly as I am nobody, Joe. I'm just a simple woman from East Belfast. And every time something, whether it comes up in the radio or there's something about gender, I say to my husband, and I can see him almost looking at me going, please be quiet. And I can't help myself. There is something that just comes out, and it genuinely comes from a heart. I just presume that injustice just causes such deep pain to me, only because, and maybe because I've been, I've been a victim of that in so many ways. But I don't know. I just live my life every day. I'm not, what does a platform mean? What does applause mean? I think the most important things is who you are on the inside and how you treat others. But I think it's important to remember I'm a human being, and I am no better than anyone else, and I'm still learning. And hey, if someone in that feels accepted and is shown grace, and somewhere in that they've been brought up in all sorts of things, but they encounter that spiritual connection with God, then I think I've done okay. But I think ultimately it's about loving God and loving my neighbor, and I'm still figuring that out. I don't always get it right. I sometimes say too much. I sometimes say too little. I know you find that hard to believe, but I have good people around me who are very straight and honest with me, and we need those people.
Well, just for the record, I'm one of those people that held you when you wanted to fight in Belfast City Council. I was one of those people that said, no, not yet, wait until.
Yes, you've been known to phone me and go, whoa, yes.
You mentioned we're all on an education, not a formal, but an education journey. You mentioned that when you were speaking there, and we have a lot to learn, and that's great. It's the ability to know that you don't know everything, which takes us all forward. But I have to say, and maybe you could explain this to us, the invitation to the TED conference, this amazingly important.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not your run-of-the-mill where you come and speak somewhere, Karen. This is an international, worldwide broadcast that is so important in terms of academia, in terms of education, in terms of all the things that shape politics and that shape civil society. How did you land that one?
I just got an email. I got an email from Eva Grossman, who sent me an email and said, Karen, would you do a TEDx talk? And yeah, I'll be honest with you, Joe, I watch TEDx talks every day. Because I need to keep this mind fed. So I'm always a big fan of TEDx, always have been, have gone along. I never in a million years thought I've been asked to, and I've had the huge honor of speaking at conferences and talking about gender and peace and reconciliation and all those things. But the TEDx one was, but I need you to know, I did not sleep. The night before that, I was extremely nervous, but it was an honor, and I, we were told the theme of bold and brilliant, and I didn't know what to do, and I just thought, I'm just going to give a little bit of Karen, and I'm really passionate that the church can be better. We all can be better. I'm passionate that the church will never reach its full potential. She will always limp when we exclude women. Simply because of the equality in God's eyes, and we're created equal. So when we exclude her, I don't know that we will ever reach what we could be and the potential of that. And so I used those 10 minutes, and the best way to do that was just to share a snippet of my life. And that's what I did, the best that I could. I mean, you watch it and you think, oh, I wish I could... Oh. Could you just, I wish you hadn't have said that. We all do that, but that's the story of, of me.
Well, I've watched it a number of occasions, and I would change none of it. And if I was you, I would change none of it. I think that apart from the fact that it makes sense, it is an explanation of who's behind the mic. What is this woman saying this, and why is she saying this, and what is her credentials to say? So, I mean, I think it's a wonderful interview.
Thank you. Thank you.
Last week we had a conversation in the middle of the turmoil of education results and all of that, and I know that Erin, your daughter, was one of those children. So yes. Explain that for the viewers. So explain what happened with Erin, and I want to take you to the circumstances around it.
Sure. Well, I mean, listen, every mom, I have to be honest, I'm not one of those moms who really pushes my kids. I just let them be. But Erin, she's against the odds sort of kid. She hasn't had it easy. If Erin gets an A or a B, it's because she has worked day and night. She's not a natural academic kid. So whenever it came, Erin, since she's been 6, has wanted to be a doctor. And I've thought, all the best, you need 3 A's for that. But, hey, you just cheer her on. But so when it came to her AS results, she had got her GCSE results last year. Her high school didn't do A levels, so she had to move to a new school to do it. And she really struggled to settle into that school for all sorts of reasons. But when it came to her ASs, Erin all Christmas worked. And she got an ABB. So I said, well, that's great. Now, ASs, you got to do your UCAS and all of that. And so when it came to results, before the couple of nights, she was upset. She was like, I'm so nervous and all. And I was like, Erin, you're not going to go worse than that ABB, maybe BBB. But, let's crack open the Chaleur. Wine for me, but Chaleur for you. This is going to be okay. I cannot express to you, Joe, when this kid opened that envelope and all her grades had dropped, but the one that stood out was she went from a B in chemistry to E. Erin's strongest things and her strongest subjects is science, has always been. She has not got from that from me, Joe. Honestly, I need you to know that. But she is naturally that science minded. And listen, we need more women in scientists, but that's another podcast. But yeah, but it was that devastation, and I hugged her, I cried with her. We all did, and we cried with her. And I contacted the school because I didn't know, is this the school? Is this the board? What way is this working? And the school reassured me that no, our grades for Erin is ABB. And I don't know. I acted as a mom. it started off as a mom, and then it progressed into like the minister mode in me, where we're going against injustice. But it was a simple tweet and social media, which was a picture of Erin because she'd won Young Scientist of the Year.
Yeah.
Joe, the other thing to say in this is that she gave me permission to do that. She wanted to speak out. Because, and I, you know, she's clearly her mother's daughter, but she was like, no, Mum, we need to speak out. And I didn't want to use that picture because I didn't want to be that mom. It's like, you know, look at my kid, you know. But I did. I just put it out, didn't think anything of it. And my phone lit up like a Christmas tree all weekend. But what happened in that, Joe, was that in the course of that weekend, I was inundated with messages and emails from teachers and students and other moms saying, my daughter, my son is in that. My son at A level has missed his place. And my husband was bringing me coffee on this Saturday, and I was crying. He goes, what's wrong with you? Why are you crying? And it was because I was so moved because some of the parents were sharing with me the effects this had had on their children, mental health. So that just put me up a gear, Joe. It then moved from mom to this is against all. this is our young people in Northern Ireland. And this was never about knocking a political party. Because at the end of the day, we do the best we can do in a pandemic. This wasn't about Peter, Weir, or DUP or any other political party. This was about saying, please just say we got this wrong and we're going to fix this, because young people are watching not only how you work together as politicians, but are you going to fix this? And so that, yeah.
Well, can I just tell, I mean, I think all of the above is right, but you did fix it now.
No, I don't know. I didn't fix it all. Everybody, the whole community.
Okay, so I was about to say that, but what I mean is that intervention that mobilized and helped to mobilize others was directed, and you're right, it was not one, that was right across the political family. And so people were in contact, we're doing all of that there. And that made the change, and the change was made, and we're glad it was made. And,
yes,
and nobody has a monopoly on that, making mistakes, and all of the above.
And thank you to everyone that worked for that, for every parent, teacher, pupil, and all the political parties. Thank you.
But surely if you were looking for any single indication that people working together with a clearly common goal, that they can make those changes. And whether that's in politics or in religion or in civic society or in civil society, that change. And I wanted you to explain that, because when I was speaking to you, you were saying this isn't about Erin, but it is about Erin, but it's about all those children.
It's about all of us, yeah.
And we all need to move forward. But for me, that is you at your best. That's taking an issue which is clearly about justice and fairness and decency and care and concern, and saying, look, do the right thing. Just do the right thing.
Just do the right thing, yeah.
We've about 5 minutes left of this. You've been speaking for an hour. I've got asking 2 questions. And I suppose that's 2 that I normally don't get asked when I'm with you. From the ministry to where you are now, and all those battles in between, do you see signs of change? Do you see some of the battles that you've fought and been part of fighting, making it easier for other young women or other women out there who will undoubtedly follow in your footsteps? So is it tangible? Can you see that change?
I hope so. I hope that this paves the way, if at least for my daughters. I think I would crumble if they came and said to me they want to be in ministry. I'd be like, no, don't do it. But the bottom line is, whether it's ministry or that whole sense of, what it means to love others and to create a community where we can be together, I hope in some way that I help pave that way. Joe, I get it wrong lots of times. Do I see change? I think so often when someone speaks out about something, particularly in theological arenas, I am one for healthy debate. Let's debate, not argue, fight, and rip each other apart. Let's bring this to the table. I haven't been invited by any churches to talk about women in leadership. So sometimes when someone speaks out, I've been invited in other arenas,
Yeah.
but so often the church can batten down its hatches and sit tight. And I get that, and I understand that. I don't know that my role is to change that. If it causes people to have the conversation, brilliant. I think my role is to empower young women and men to be all that they feel that they're called to be in whatever arena in life that is. So am I disappointed that church isn't dealing with some stuff? Yes. But what I can do is hopefully empower others. Because I still get the scars. I have the marks and the bruises, and we all do, but yeah, I think it's about empowering, particularly young girls and young women, because nothing would delight me more to see women. I have encountered so many women who cannot move into a leadership position in their church, and I think, goodness, you're losing out. Joe, one of the things I want to say is that whenever you have women in church leadership, it's not just about that church community in that church building. It begins to filter down into your community of people, and then it filters out into the streets and into your communities. When men and women are working together, which is the way it should be, we all win. We all win. So do I think things are changing? I hope so. And it's not just about me. There are many women and men who are speaking up and saying, this needs to change. Will it happen? I don't know.
I think it is happening. And I think part of the observation is that you're nearly too close to see these changes. See, I think the difference is with you is that some churches want to manage society and you want to change society. And it's a big difference.
Thank you. Yeah.
How do you relax if you ever do? I know you read and I know you like a glass of wine. Not necessarily at the same time, but for instance, just hypothetically, is there a book? Is there a book about you, for you, and written by you in the pipeline somewhere?
Goodness, I have been asked, and when my mom was passing away, that was one of the things she asked me to do. So I don't want to get emotional, but she just said, it's time to write, Karen. It's time to do this. And I said, yes, and someday, yeah, I would love to, because I yeah, and I would love Joe to do it and give money to train young women leaders. I would love, there's so much I'd love to do, but yeah. But how do I relax? I've recently, since my mom took very ill, I started cycling, and it helps me mentally, and I can't get out in that weather at the moment, and I've still a bit of weight to lose, but I'd like to get healthy. Reading's a big thing. I absolutely, as you say, love reading and being with my family. I have a 4-year-old, and he ages me and keeps me young at the same time. And so work and life balance, I am so wick at it. I was going to say crap there, but I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word because you've told me I'm not allowed to swear.
Megan's at university now, isn't she?
Megan's 20. Megan's at university. Megan's creative. She's into film and TV production. She has her heart set, and for some reason she wants to live in Galway or Dublin. She just wants to live in the south of Ireland. That's where her heart is. Erin hopes to pursue medicine, and Jonah's starting P1. So there is a massive gap there. Jonah's are beautiful.
I mean, that's all of that is great, because it gives you, as you say, the variety of all of that. And no matter how powerful your calling, I think you need that warmth of the family, both your immediate family and your community family. You need them around you, because we all have dark nights and we all have these kind of worries. I have to say, you've been a wonderful guest.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you. And to your community of listeners, giving an hour of your time to listen to someone in a collar's tough going.
No, I mean, I think you'll be quite pleasantly surprised that you've helped to break down some of the stereos of religious leaders. You've helped to explain some of the hope that people have for the future. You didn't demonize anybody, and you give an explanation as to where we're all going together. Some are going quicker than others, and you need to have patience. You don't have a great deal of patience. So for being
It reminds me how much you know me. Charlie worked with you at the chaplaincy. Oh dear.
You're my guest, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bless you all.
And for Scéalta, good night. See you then.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.